Okay, so this video is for biology, chapter 2.3 and 2.4. Carbon compounds. Organic chemistry is a chemistry that involves the element carbon. Specifically, it was first called organic chemistry because the compounds were created by organisms, thus the organic. So living things contain carbon. Carbon is the main structure, the main element of these four major macro large molecules in the body: carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, and proteins. We're going to talk about the structure of them all and what they're for. So metabolism. Well, let me first just back up. This isn't in your slide, but I want to, or in your notes, but I want to talk about it. Carbon is unique. That it's because of its bonding capability. So if we were to draw a carbon atom, so there's carbon in its nucleus, we have protons and neutrons, and there are 6 protons in there, which means the carbon atom has 6 electrons. Those first 2 electrons will go in that inner shell right there, which leaves 4 more electrons for that outer shell. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll show it to you. 4 electrons, 1, 2, 3, 4 in its outer shell. And in the outer valence shell, you need 8 electrons to be happy. So carbon will want to bond with either 1 or up to 4 different atoms to become happy. So for example, carbon can bond with 4 hydrogen atoms covalently, sharing electrons, just like, you see that? And that is the compound methane, CH4, methane gas. And carbon can also bond with itself as well as other atoms, so it forms these things what are known as carbon chains. There's a carbon chain, or even carbon rings. Like if you think a hexagon ring, a pentagon ring, carbon can bond with itself and make those things. So, metabolism is just all the chemical reactions that happen in your body, and these chemical bonds contain potential energy. So when you put food in your face and you chew it up, though the chemicals that make up that food contains potential energy, the bonds within it. And metabolic reactions actually break those bonds, break them to release the potential energy. Large carbohydrates, like pizza crust, is a carbohydrate. They break it down into smaller and smaller molecules. The smallest carbohydrate being, it's called a monosaccharide, specifically one like glucose. And then your body will combine the glucose with oxygen inside your cells to release this energy called ATP, which we'll talk more of later. Carbohydrates are made of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen atoms, and they're the main source of energy for your body. The simple sugars, you can see here, here's just one carbon ring, and you might say, well, there's no C's in that. How can that be a carbon ring? Well, actually, there's a carbon at every corner. That it's just understood in organic chemistry structural formulas that there's a carbon there. And this is a monosaccharide, or a simple sugar. Glucose is an example that we already spoke about, and fructose. Complex carbohydrates are called polysaccharides. That prefix poly means more than 2, okay? And an example is cellulose or glycogen in your liver and your muscle cells. So here we go. We have a monosaccharide. The 2 have been joined together to form what's known as a disaccharide. And if you have more than 2, it's called a polysaccharide. Mono 1, poly more than 2. Lipids are fats. They are also made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, but not in the same proportion. The fatty acid chains can either be saturated, like you can see here, and saturated just means full of hydrogen, meaning there's no more room for hydrogens to bond to carbon. Saturated fats are solid at room temperature, like butter, for example. Unsaturated fats, here's one there. You can hardly see it, but in red there, that is a double bond, meaning two sets of electrons are shared there. It causes the fat to actually kink a little bit. These fats, unsaturated, are liquid at room temperature. This is something like vegetable oil or olive oil. Fats, lipids, are nonpolar. They do not mix with water. They are scared of water, the fats are. They provide also energy for the body, insulation, protection, things like that. Proteins are very diverse in your human body or in any kind of living organism body. And what that is it's a chain or a polymer, a long grouping of amino acids. They're very diverse. What should I say? Enzymes are an example of a specific type of protein. Also made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but they have a different element that carbohydrates and lipids don't have, which is nitrogen. Amino acids have three main parts. Here is the amino group, and every amino acid has this group. They have a carboxyl group over here, and every amino acid has that. And they all have a hydrogen, but then they also have what's called an R group. And the R group changes depending on what type of an amino acid you have. So to make a protein, you need to combine, let's say this is an amino acid, this is an amino acid, and this is an amino acid. To make a protein, you need to put those amino acids together. That one has a brick on it. Put them together to make a protein or a polypeptide. The building blocks, like I just said, I think of Legos. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. In your body, you have 20 different amino acids, and this picture just shows, looks like beads on the string. A string, the beads represent different amino acids that are joined together. Protein structure. The first level, so to make a protein, it gets kind of complex, and you divide the complexity into levels. The first level being the simplest. The first level is just the sequence of amino acids. Am I spelling things right? Not amino. Amino acids. Okay? That's the first level. It's the simplest level of structure. This amino acid, this amino acid, this amino acid, the order that they're in. The second level is when that chain gets folded or twirled. It's called an alpha helix or a beta sheet. A helix is like if you took your hair and you curled it. That would be an alpha helix. A beta sheet would be like crimping your hair. Sorry if you don't know what that is, but like if you took a sheet of paper and bent it on itself, like kind of like a fan. That would be helix. The third level gives that protein structure a 3D shape. So you need your 3D glasses. And all it is that protein is getting folded in on each other. There's more bonds that are happening to make it a little bit more 3D. The fourth level is the most complex level, and what happens is there's chains of amino acids that are just put next to each other. So here's a chain, they're clumped together. An example is hemoglobin. In your blood that carries oxygen actually has 4 amino acid chains that are globbed together. Proteins can denature, which means break down. So in egg white, there's a protein called albumin. You know when you crack a raw egg open, the egg white is what color? Well, it doesn't have any color. It's see-through. It's clear. But you know that when you cook that egg, as you see here, the egg white turns color. It goes from clear, transparent, to white. And that is a result of chemical denaturation. That protein that was in its globular form back here, that albumin, is actually denatured down to its first level. So back to this. So an example is cooking an egg white. So hazardous chemicals can denature proteins in your body. High temperatures can denature, like if you break a really high temperature, can denature proteins in your body. So that is not a good thing. Protein structure. So the way proteins are built, or what they look like, depends on the sequence of amino acids and the shape as those amino acids interact or bond with each other. Some examples of different proteins in the body. Keratin in your skin is waxy, tough, and so it helps protect your body from outside, like bacteria, from invaders. You also have keratin in your hair that helps protect the strength of your hair. Transport. Some proteins transport things like hemoglobin transports oxygen. It actually grabs onto oxygen and takes it to the cells in your body that need oxygen. You have proteins in your muscle fibers, so within your muscles, proteins that will cause your muscles to contract and relax. Contract and relax. Okay, there the lights are. And the last group of macromolecules is called nucleic acids. You have two kinds, DNA and RNA. That D stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and the R stands for ribonucleic acid. They both contain a sugar. That's what the S stands for there, S for sugar. And they each contain a phosphate group. And they both contain a nitrogenous base. And we're going to talk more about DNA in the genetics unit, but nucleic acids make up the DNA. So here is a double strand of DNA. Here is a nucleic acid. Or actually, specifically called